Hi, it's Mike Harris back with What in the Law podcast. And today I'm going to do a little overview about DUIs and DWAIs in Colorado and what those mean. Because that's one of the most common types of cases we deal with is DUIs and DWAIs. So what are all these letters? Well, DUI means driving under the influence. And while it exists in all states in the country, there are some slight differences in what these words can mean. And in Colorado, what DUI means, or driving under the influence, is that you are driving and substantially incapable of safely operating a vehicle because of alcohol or drugs. And the way I like to describe that is drunk driving. Drunk is not the word we use in court, but that's essentially what DUI is. Well, what if you're not at that level? You're not drunk, but you still consume something. Can it be illegal? Absolutely. That's what a DWAI is. In Colorado, that is called driving while ability impaired. And impaired basically means that you have consumed either alcohol or drugs, and that you are affected to the slightest degree that you are less safe to drive than you would be had you not consumed anything. I like to call that buzzed driving. You don't have to be completely drunk, but if you are affected a little bit and less safe to drive, that's enough for what is a DWAI. Now, there is a few things to consider when you are looking at a DUI and DWAI. And one of those is there a number of alcohol or something else in your system? Well, in Colorado, if you have an alcohol level of 0.08% or higher, that's enough for DUI. That is what is called the legal limit. And even if you had a high tolerance, if you drive over a 0.08, that's enough for DUI. Now, you might be able to challenge the test result, but if the test result is valid and you have that number, that's enough. Well, what if you're under a 0.08 or you don't have alcohol, but you have some other substance? In that situation, it just depends on how you react, how it affects you. What's the evidence look like as far as what testimony there is from the police, what the driving is like, and is there a video, and how are you acting on that? Now, people often get confused at what the numbers mean. If you have an alcohol level of 0.05 or higher in Colorado, there is a instruction that a jury would receive that you can be inferred to be impaired or guilty of a DWAI based on that level. However, that has to be compared with all of the other evidence. And that 0.05 is absolutely not a limit. And you can be over 0.05 and not be guilty if it does not cause you to be impaired. There is something similar with cannabis cases, where if you have a certain level in your blood, and it's measured by what they call nanograms, and if you have 5 nanograms per milliliter of blood in your system, you can also be inferred to be guilty of being impaired, but then also has to be compared with all of the other evidence, including testimony, video evidence, driving evidence, to see how, if at all, it affected you. It is absolutely not a limit, and you can be over that number and be not guilty and be perfectly sober. But that's going to really depend on that evidence, and largely depends on what your experience and tolerance is. And that's the same for alcohol and cannabis. Now, strangely, other types of substances, whether it be prescription medication or hard drugs, don't have any sort of legal number that matters. It's just, is it in your system and how does it affect you? So that's a little bit of an overview of the difference of a DUI versus a DWAI and what you need to look for. And obviously there are many different circumstances and facts that go into weighing these types of cases, but that's a little bit of a description. Obviously the best thing to do is not to have anything in your system when you drive, but also the reality is most people at some point have consumed something and driven. And that doesn't necessarily mean you're guilty, but it depends how much and what those circumstances are. So that's a little overview. So tell me what you think on this podcast. Send me a comment, like, subscribe, put in any requests, and I'll see you next time on What in the Law podcast.